this next section is going to be probably the hardest for me because I don't really love doing this, but John had this idea of kind of like projecting, right? Like, so the market right now is being recorded January of 23. Interest rates have risen. Really, the outlook is unclear, but it's kind of fun to sort of predict. So, John, this is your idea. So I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. What do you see projections for the year? And then how do you see our kind of Wild Oak Capital kind of making that dance? And where do you see maybe potential opportunity?
I'll see if I can dance around this one a little bit. So, I mean, it's always hard to predict the future, right? We don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I think the one thing that I see pretty consistently at this moment in January 2023, pricing expectations from sellers still have not really met cost of capital. But I think Shane made a great point earlier when he said there's always a deal to be had in any market, right? So I think there's some people with some floating debt, some operators that maybe, they're going to start feeling the crunch of that and the rates starting to float up here. So I'm very bullish. I think there's going to be opportunities, and I think we just need to be well positioned here, coming into the first half of 2023. But again, it's really hard to say, are we in a recession? Are we going into recession? Again, it's really hard to predict these things. But I think having the awareness to understand where you're at in the cycle, that's what really makes a true operator a good operator versus someone, maybe not at that level.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Ben, what about you?
Same. I get to piggyback off the people who are much smarter than I am. Like I said, just came from a conference and talking a lot about what this looks like and what the future holds. I think no matter where you're going through, like, and which metrics you're pulling or which specific economic data you're looking at, to John's point, are you in a recession? Are you not in a recession? Who's calculating that? And what data is that based off of? There's a lot of those things. So looking down the line, I think he's absolutely right. I think being patient in this market, I think there are going to be some opportunities that present themselves. It's not going to be the same as it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Like the future probably is going to look very different, or at least somewhat different than we've seen, because it's just been such a high, and then capital has been so incredibly inexpensive. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to do a deal at all. What it just means is we're going to have to shift and be a little bit more creative, whether it be owner carry, or whether it be we're assuming a loan, or whether it be getting a little bit creative about how we structure the deal. There's a lot of different ways to do this. And if we do this well, and to John's point again, I think that there's some people that will be looking to turn that property over, turn some properties over. And I think as long as we do our job of making sure that our investors understand where we are, our goals and our plans, and bringing these people together with the opportunity to pick up some deals, which I think we're probably going to see in the next 6 to 8 months, we're going to be well positioned to do some good for a lot of people.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this is super hard to predict. So Shane, your turn.
I think it's really geared towards market and goals, because there's a lot of indications of obviously the volatility now, but getting into an opportunity that makes sense in the current market. If you have a goal and your intentions are a longer term play, you can ride out a lot of that volatility without the worries, especially if you were able to get in and lock in some fixed rate debt over the past couple of years, and you have a longer projection. Right now, a lot of those operators are not concerned. We're one of those where we have that longer term debt, where what happens right now doesn't really affect our business plan. Obviously, it's interesting to keep a pulse on, but we're looking further down the line. We're looking for when things stabilize after we get our business plans in, and pricing right now isn't affecting our investment because we're not selling right now. For the most part. And so I think really just honing in on your market and the goals that you have. A lot of operations now with supply chains and cost of goods going up have more stabilized to where they're not doing as deep of renovations. Maybe it's more cosmetic business plans, and they're not increasing the rates to as fast as they once were, but their cost to turn those are a lot less. And then you may have some markets where, because you're kind of getting into this recession level and you've got labor force kind of stabilizing, that small development is more of a better play at this point while you get some of the volatility out. So as long as you can line up a lot of your team outside of just who you're partnering with, if you have a good lender, if you have a good broker, if you have a good team with those outside sources that are helping you get to what your goals and achievements are, there's a lot of opportunity there that one has protections now, and then if depending on your business plan, could alleviate a lot of the concerns that may be in the market today.
Yeah, I love what you guys said. I mean, really, really well put. I'll just kind of like say, I don't really have too much to add to what you guys said. I mean, the truth is like, we're all sort of guessing, but at the end of the day, I think the common thread is whatever happens, I think we have the ability to sort of be nimble and be patient, right? So like, wait for the right deal. We have no reason to force it, which is a really nice place to be. And two is like, maybe we have to shift a little. Maybe the deals we're buying in 23, March of 23 look different than they did in March of 22. And there's lots of reasons behind that. I mean, it's amazing what happened in a year. Interest rates really went from 3.5-ish, let's say, to 7.5 in about a year's time. And obviously that creates huge shifts. So for us to be able to say, all right, that obviously decreases the initial buying power. Doesn't mean we're not buying. It just means we're looking at it in a different lens. So I think, yeah, we have like, it's impossible to have the crystal ball, but it is kind of fun to guess. So I love the idea, John.
Well, what before we move on, I do want to say that Shane nailed it on the head, and he kind of glossed over it, but it's really, really important. He's talking about lining up these teams and lenders. It's also not just one, right? Like we've gone through situations where we thought we had lending sorted, and then that lending would fall out almost at the last moment. We had to be really nimble and ask more questions. So the ability to look down the line and the grander stroke here, like building a team that is nimble, building a team that can be creative, asking questions, and also being able to fix problems as they arise, because they're going to, right? In this business, in any business, something's going to go sideways, and your ability to figure that out, take a second, breathe, and then sort it out is going to be how you win or lose in this space. So, for example, Shane found an amazing lender and helped us out with a certain deal. We got it closed, and that property is performing amazingly. But it didn't come without a few hiccups every single time that's going to happen. So that's more than anything else. Like as we go and we progress through these next months, these next years, how nimble can we be? How creative can we be? And who's on our team is going to help us do that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up. So a couple of things looking back to, like, there were some challenges, right? Like one challenge, for example, was a deal that we had in Northern Colorado, of all places, actually. And we thought it was an awesome deal. And it was under contract, we had earnest money on the line, all this stuff, right? Then we got there and it was just in person, not what was really portrayed, quite honestly. That's the only way to say it. So we walked from the deal, and I remember exactly where I was standing, being like, man, this stinks. Like, this is a huge setback. Looking back now, after 6 months of like air, it's not a big deal, right? We had to fight to get our earnest money back. It would kind of turn into this weird thing. But now that it's kind of beyond us, I'm like, you know what? All that was kind of wisdom. Like, that's how I view it now, is like, now that we have our one deal that we almost lost a bunch of earnest money on, was really kind of mismarketed from my perspective. That type of thing happens. And the first time it hurts. But now that we have a little bit more wisdom around those type of things, like, in a weird way, it's a good lesson learned.